When loyalty ends at the badge and begins in the bedroom, someone always ends up dead. Tonight, we're diving into a case that shocked the law enforcement community in Raleigh, North Carolina. A story of betrayal, passion, and murder that would destroy 3 lives and rock the foundation of trust within one of the city's most respected police departments. This is the story of Detective Rachel Mendez and Detective Lynn Carter, 2 partners who shared everything on the job until one of them decided to share something off the clock that would lead to murder. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers all around the world. Raleigh, North Carolina, November 2019. The autumn leaves were falling, but inside the walls of the Raleigh Police Department, something much darker was about to come crashing down. Detective Rachel Mendez was everything the department could want in an officer. At 32 years old, she was sharp-minded, decorated, and well-liked by everyone from rookies to veterans. Her arrest record spoke for itself, and her colleagues trusted her with their lives. Her partner of 6 years, Detective Lynn Carter, was cut from the same cloth. 35 years old, a mother of 2 young children, and married for over a decade to Tom Carter, a beloved high school teacher who regularly volunteered at the precinct's youth outreach programs. Lynn was known for being cool under pressure, methodical in her investigations, and fiercely protective of those she cared about. Together, Rachel and Lynn were the perfect professional pair. They had cleared dozens of cases, built an unshakable reputation, and formed what everyone believed was an unbreakable bond of trust and loyalty. But as we'll discover, that bond was about to be tested in the most devastating way possible. To understand what happened on that fatal November morning, we need to go back several months earlier, to a time when both detectives' personal lives were beginning to unravel. Rachel Mendez had recently gone through a bitter divorce. After 8 years of marriage, she found herself alone, questioning everything she thought she knew about love and commitment. The job became her escape, but late at night in her empty apartment, the loneliness was suffocating. Lynn Carter, meanwhile, was facing her own marital struggles. Despite appearing to have the perfect family from the outside, her marriage to Tom had grown cold and distant. They were, as she would later confess to Rachel, just coexisting. It was during these vulnerable moments that the foundation of their partnership began to shift. What started as professional support slowly morphed into something more personal, more intimate. Late-night conversations in their patrol car turned into after-work drinks at O'Malley's, a cop bar downtown where they could talk freely without judgment. It was during one of these conversations that Lynn made a confession that would change everything. "Tom and I are just coexisting," she told Rachel one evening over her 3rd beer. Her voice was heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. "We share a house, we share kids, but we don't share a life anymore." Rachel, still raw from her own divorce, offered what she thought was a sympathetic ear. She understood the pain of a failing marriage, the feeling of being trapped in a relationship that had died long ago but hadn't been buried yet. That night, Lynn went home early, claiming she had a headache. She needed to get back to her family, back to the life she was questioning more and more each day. But Tom Carter didn't go home early that night, and that's where our story takes its first dark turn. What happened next would later be reconstructed through cell phone records, credit card statements, and the testimony of bar patrons who witnessed the beginning of the end. After Lynn left O'Malley's that night, Rachel remained at the bar, nursing her drink and thinking about her partner's confession. She wasn't alone for long. Tom Carter, who had been volunteering at the precinct's youth basketball practice, stopped by the bar, something he rarely did. The conversation that night was innocent enough. Tom was concerned about Lynn, who had been distant and moody at home. Rachel, feeling protective of her partner, tried to reassure him that it was just work stress. But as they talked, something shifted between them. Here were 2 people, both feeling neglected and unappreciated in their relationships. Rachel, recently divorced and lonely. Tom, married but feeling like a stranger in his own home. By fall of 2019, what had started as a chance encounter had evolved into a full-blown affair. The irony was devastating. Rachel and Tom found comfort in each other while discussing the very person who connected them both, Lynn. The affair was conducted with the precision of a covert operation. Rachel would visit the Carter home for coffee when Lynn was working late-night briefings or pulling double shifts. She used the spare key that Lynn had given her years earlier, a key meant for emergencies, now being used for the ultimate betrayal. Tom would tell his children that Aunt Rachel was helping him with some work projects when they saw her car in the driveway. The lies came easily, each one building on the last, creating an elaborate web of deception. But in a small community like the one surrounding the Raleigh Police Department, secrets don't stay buried for long. By October 2019, Lynn Carter was beginning to notice changes in her husband's behavior. He was suddenly more attentive, more affectionate, classic signs of guilt that her detective instincts couldn't ignore. There were other signs too. Tom's sudden interest in working out new cologne and the way he guarded his phone like a state secret. But the most telling sign was how differently he reacted when Rachel's name came up in conversation. For years, Tom had been friendly but distant with Rachel, polite, but not particularly interested in her personal life. Suddenly, he was asking detailed questions about her cases, her schedule, her well-being. Lynn's suspicions reached a breaking point in early November when she found a receipt in Tom's jacket pocket. It was from a restaurant across town, a place they'd never been to together, dated for a time when he claimed to be grading papers at home. That weekend, while Tom was at the hardware store, Lynn did what any good detective would do. She investigated. She checked Tom's browser history, looked through his text messages, and found what she was looking for. The messages between Tom and Rachel were devastating. They weren't just having an affair, they were talking about a future together, about how Lynn deserved better and how they couldn't keep living a lie. But the most damning evidence came in the form of photos. Rachel had sent Tom pictures of herself in locations that Lynn recognized: their bedroom, their kitchen, their living room. The woman Lynn trusted most in the world had been violating her home, her marriage, and her life for months. The betrayal was complete, and Lynn Carter was about to make a decision that would destroy everything. November 12, 2019. It was a Tuesday morning, and the autumn air in Raleigh carried the kind of chill that warned of the approaching winter. But inside the Carter home, the temperature was about to drop to absolute zero. Lynn Carter had called in sick to work that morning, the first sick day she'd taken in over 2 years. She told her supervisor she had a stomach bug, but the truth was much darker. She was planning to confront her husband about the affair, and she wanted to do it when the children were at school and she could speak freely. What Lynn didn't know was that Rachel Mendez had received a text from Tom the night before, telling her that Lynn would be working a double shift and wouldn't be home until evening. It was a lie designed to give them more time together, but it would prove to be Tom's final and most fatal deception. At approximately 9:47 a.m., Rachel's patrol car pulled into the Carter driveway. She used her key to enter through the back door just as she had dozens of times before. But this time, instead of finding an empty house, she found Lynn Carter standing in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, holding a cup of coffee with hands that were trembling with rage. The confrontation was instant and explosive. "You have some nerve," Lynn said, her voice deadly calm in the way that only comes before a storm. "Using my key, in my house, with my husband." According to Rachel's later testimony, she immediately tried to explain, to apologize, to somehow make sense of the inexcusable. But Lynn wasn't interested in explanations. "6 years," Lynn continued, her voice rising. "6 years we've been partners. I've had your back through every dangerous call, every bad situation. I trusted you with my life, and this is how you repay me." Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices, then screaming. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door, told police she heard Lynn shouting, "How could you do this to me? How could you do this to my children?" Tom Carter, who had been in the garage working on his car, came running into the house when he heard the commotion. His presence only made things worse. "You're both sick," Lynn screamed at them. "You're both sick, twisted people who deserve each other." And then, according to both Rachel and Tom's testimony, Lynn Carter put her hand on her service weapon. What happened next would be debated in courtrooms, analyzed by forensic experts, and dissected by investigators for months to come. According to Rachel Mendez's initial statement to police, Lynn Carter drew her service weapon and pointed it at her. Fearing for her life, Rachel, who was also armed, drew her own weapon and fired once in self-defense. Tom Carter corroborated this story, telling investigators that his wife had become completely unhinged and had threatened to kill Rachel. At 10:23 a.m., Rachel made the 911 call that would seal her fate. "911, what's your emergency?" Officer down, I need paramedics immediately." Rachel's voice on the recording is panicked, sobbing, barely coherent. "Ma'am, what's your location?" 1247 Oakwood Drive. "Please hurry, she's bleeding badly." "Who's bleeding, ma'am?" "My partner, Detective Lynn Carter. She pointed her gun at me and I just reacted. I didn't mean to, it was an accident." But even as Rachel was giving her statement to the responding officers, the physical evidence was telling a very different story. Lynn Carter was found on the kitchen floor, shot once in the chest. The bullet had entered her heart at close range, killing her almost instantly. She was still in her pajamas and her service weapon was found in its holster, the safety still engaged. The crime scene told a story that contradicted everything Rachel and Tom had claimed. The investigation into Lynn Carter's death was handled by the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, as is protocol when a police officer is killed. The lead investigator was Detective Sandra Martinez, a 20-year veteran who had worked dozens of officer-involved shootings. From the moment Martinez arrived at the scene, she knew something didn't add up. The physical evidence was inconsistent with the story we were being told, Martinez later testified. If Lynn had drawn her weapon and pointed it at Rachel, we would have expected to see it in her hand or nearby. Instead, it was holstered and hadn't been fired. The autopsy results conducted by the state medical examiner were even more damning. The bullet trajectory showed that Lynn had been shot from above, as if she were sitting or kneeling when the fatal shot was fired. The powder burns on her clothing indicated that the gun had been fired from less than 3 feet away. But perhaps the most telling piece of evidence came from Lynn's own phone. Text messages recovered from Lynn's device showed that she had discovered the affair weeks before her death. On November 11th, the night before she was killed, Lynn had sent a chilling message to her husband. "If she shows up here again, I swear to God I will end it, one way or another." The message suggested that Lynn had given Tom an ultimatum about the affair, and that she was prepared to take drastic action if Rachel continued to come to their home. But there was another text message, sent just hours before the shooting, that would prove to be crucial to the prosecution's case. At 6:47 a.m. on November 12th, Lynn had texted Rachel directly, "I know everything. Stay away from my family." Rachel had read the message but never responded. Instead, she had driven to the Carter home, where she would claim she had no idea Lynn would be there. The investigation revealed a pattern of deception that went far beyond the affair itself. As investigators dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a web of lies and deception that painted a very different picture of Rachel Mendez than the one her colleagues thought they knew. Financial records showed that Rachel had been struggling with debt from her divorce and had recently been denied for a loan to keep her apartment. Text messages between Rachel and Tom revealed that they had been discussing the possibility of Tom leaving Lynn and the children to start a new life together. In one particularly damning exchange, Rachel had written, "She'll never let you go voluntarily. You know that, right?" Tom had responded, "I can't just abandon my kids." Rachel's reply, "Kids adapt, they'll understand eventually." But perhaps the most shocking discovery came from Rachel's own phone records. GPS data showed that she had driven by the Carter home multiple times in the weeks leading up to the shooting, sometimes in the middle of the night when she wasn't on duty. Investigators also discovered that Rachel had been researching Lynn's work schedule obsessively, checking the department's internal system to see when Lynn would be working late or pulling double shifts. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had become obsessed not just with Tom Carter, but with the idea of replacing Lynn in every aspect of her life. But the most damaging evidence against Rachel came from an unexpected source: the Carter family's home security system. Tom Carter had installed a basic security system in his home 2 years earlier, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. The system included cameras at the front and back entrances, and while Tom claimed the system wasn't working on the day of the shooting, investigators were able to recover footage from the cloud storage. What they found changed everything. The footage showed Rachel arriving at the house at 9:47 a.m. just as she had testified. But it also showed her sitting in her car for nearly 10 minutes before getting out, clearly seeing Lynn's car in the driveway and knowing she was home. More importantly, the camera captured audio from inside the house through an open window. The audio contradicted Rachel's version of events entirely. Instead of Lynn drawing her weapon first, the recording captured Lynn saying, "I want you out of my house, out of my life, and away from my family." Rachel could be heard responding, "You don't understand, Lynn. Tom and I love each other. He's not happy with you." Lynn's voice getting louder, "He's my husband. Those are my children. This is my life." Then came the sound that would haunt everyone who heard it, Rachel's voice, cold and determined, "Not anymore." The gunshot followed immediately. The recording also captured Tom's voice, but not in the way he had described. Instead of trying to stop his wife from drawing her weapon, he could be heard saying, "Oh God, Rachel, what have you done?" The audio evidence proved that Rachel Mendez had committed premeditated murder, not self-defense. Rachel Mendez was arrested and charged with first-degree murder on December 3, 2019. The case made headlines across North Carolina and beyond, with media outlets dubbing it the love triangle murder and from partners to rivals. The trial began on March 15, 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was beginning to shut down the world. Despite the unusual circumstances, prosecutor Jennifer Walsh was determined to see justice served for Lynn Carter. This was not a crime of passion, Walsh told the jury in her opening statement. This was a calculated, cold-blooded murder committed by someone who had sworn to protect and serve, but instead chose to destroy the life of the woman who had been her partner and friend. Rachel's defense attorney, Marcus Thompson, argued that his client had acted in self-defense during a highly emotional confrontation. Rachel Mendez is not a killer, Thompson argued. She is a decorated police officer who found herself in an impossible situation, facing a colleague who had become dangerously unstable. But the evidence against Rachel was overwhelming. The prosecution called dozens of witnesses, including the medical examiner who explained how the bullet trajectory proved Lynn had not been pointing a gun at Rachel, the forensic expert who analyzed the gunpowder residue, the digital forensics specialist who recovered the damning text messages and GPS data. And then there was Tom Carter himself. Tom had initially agreed to testify on Rachel's behalf, but as the weight of the evidence mounted, he changed his mind. In a stunning reversal, he admitted on the witness stand that he had lied in his initial statement to police. "I was in shock," he testified, tears streaming down his face. "I had just watched someone I thought I loved murder my wife. I didn't know what to do, so I went along with her story. But I can't live with that lie anymore." Tom's testimony was devastating to Rachel's defense. He described how Rachel had become increasingly possessive and obsessive about their relationship, how she had pressured him to leave Lynn, and how she had talked about Lynn as if she were an obstacle to be removed. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching their verdict. On April 7, 2020, Rachel Mendez was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury had rejected the first-degree murder charge, concluding that while the killing was intentional, it wasn't premeditated for a sufficient period to warrant the more serious charge. During the sentencing hearing, Lynn Carter's family finally had their chance to speak. Lynn's mother, Maria Santos, told the court, "Lynn dedicated her life to serving others, to protecting the innocent, and to being the best mother she could be. Rachel Mendez took all of that away, not just from Lynn, but from all of us who loved her." Lynn's 2 children, now 12 and 14, had written victim impact statements that were read by the prosecutor. Their words were heartbreaking testimonies to the mother they had lost and the life that had been stolen from them. Rachel Mendez was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 20 years. As the sentence was read, she showed no emotion, staring straight ahead as if in a trance. Tom Carter, whose testimony had ultimately helped convict his former lover, left North Carolina immediately after the trial. He moved to Oregon with his children, changed his name, and tried to rebuild their shattered lives. The headlines read, "From partners to rivals, the love triangle that shattered the force." The Rachel Mendez case sent shockwaves through law enforcement communities across the country. It raised difficult questions about trust, accountability, and the psychological pressures faced by police officers. The Raleigh Police Department implemented new policies regarding interdepartmental relationships and mandatory counseling for officers going through personal crises. They also established the Lynn Carter Memorial Fund to support the families of fallen officers. But perhaps the most lasting impact of the case was the way it changed how police departments view the concept of partnership. The bond between police partners is supposed to be unbreakable, built on absolute trust and mutual respect. Rachel Mendez had shattered that ideal in the most devastating way possible. 3 years later, Rachel Mendez remains in the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women, where she has reportedly become a model prisoner. She has never granted an interview about the case and has shown no remorse for her actions. Tom Carter has never spoken publicly about what happened. His children, now teenagers, are said to be thriving in their new life, though they will forever carry the trauma of losing their mother in such a violent way. And Lynn Carter, the decorated detective who dedicated her life to serving others, is remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived as a devoted mother, a loyal partner, and a protector of the innocent. The case of Rachel Mendez serves as a stark reminder that evil can wear a badge, that betrayal can come from those we trust most, and that the line between protector and predator can be thinner than we'd like to believe. In the end, this story isn't really about a love triangle or a crime of passion. It's about the destruction that occurs when someone decides that their desires matter more than human life, when they choose selfishness over service, and when they forget that their oath to protect and serve applies to everyone, including those closest to them. Lynn Carter died because she trusted the wrong person. She died because she believed that her partner's loyalty was as strong as her own. She died because she never imagined that the woman who had sworn to have her back would be the one to put a bullet in her heart. Justice was served when Rachel Mendez was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. But for the Carter family, for Lynn's colleagues, and for everyone who knew and loved her, no amount of justice can bring back the woman who was taken from them far too soon. This has been another episode exploring one of the most shocking cases of betrayal and murder in recent memory. Thank you for joining me as we explored this tragic story. If you found this case as compelling as I did, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories. And don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from all around the world. Until next time, stay safe out there.